We've seen the stock market. It's crazy. He's manic depressive. Mr. Market gets up one day, he's happy. The next day he's sad. And the market goes all over the place. Now, the reality is we teach efficient market theory because we don't have a better way to explain the market. So you can walk in as a professor and say, I know this isn't how it works, but I'm going to teach this to you anyway.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hi and welcome to the My Future Business Show. My name is Rick Nuske and I am your host, and I have to say I'm very privileged because I get the opportunity to touch on so many different fascinating topics, and today's topic is no different. We're going to be looking at the actual need for getting an MBA, but what I noticed in the write-up for my next guest is he says that most don't actually need an MBA. So I'd like you to welcome to the show Alexander Lowry. How are you, Alexander?
Rick, I'm very well, and it's a pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem at all, not a problem. Look, for everybody who's listening, Alexander is a professor of finance at Gordon College. He's also the director for the school's Master of Science in Financial and Analysis program. So tell us a little bit about that role.
It doesn't really roll off the tongue, right? It's a bit of a mouthful.
It's not a smooth flowing thing to say, so I was practicing that.
for today, let's just simplify. We'll just say Masters of Finance. It's a lot easier to put it out there in the subject.
Yes, that sounds great.
So I think the easiest way to conceptualize it is the traditional MBA, at least in America, and I realize I lived in London for 7 years. Mm-hmm. It can be different over there, but the way we talk about it in America is the traditional MBA is a 2-year program, and the sandwich in the middle is during the summer is you get a job opportunity. You have an internship, and the whole point of getting an MBA is you go get a good job and you change. So maybe you start in investment banking and you do consulting, or you start in consulting and you move into venture capital, whatever it might be. It's all about the job transition. Yep. And the way that I thought about it, I went to Wharton for mine, right? I believed in buying a good brand, going to the best business school you could, and that is traditionally the way it's seen in America. I know in the UK it's a bit different, and the cost is very different, much more reasonable in the UK from when I was there, and I'm assuming in Australia it's probably closer to the UK model. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I suffered this same fate to the tune of about 50,000. So, and that's Australian dollars. So,
right.
Yeah, this is completely relevant for our audience who are, beginner entrepreneurs and existing small to medium business owners who are, wondering which path to take.
Right. Well, let me paint the perspective that I see here. So I went to Wharton thinking I wanted that brand, mm-hmm. and that's the way we talk about in America. Whatever the top-ranked school you get into that's where you go, which generally I think is a terrible philosophy. We're not talking fit at all. We're not talking approach. We're just saying it's about the school you get into. So you get into Harvard, if you get into Wharton, whatever you get into, that's going to set you up for success for life. And part of the selling point for me was Wharton talks about we have 96,000 alumni. You have access to the best network in the world. And I bought that hook, line, and sinker. I'm thinking that's what I'm buying here. Mm. Now, for perspective, the average MBA tuition in America is $140,000 US. That's a big chunk of change.
Sure is.
It's also 2 years of opportunity cost of not earning a salary or not starting a business, whatever it might be. And the top schools, it's above that. So Wharton and the others are getting closer to 200, right? So sort of scary numbers. Mm-hmm. And the perspective is if you don't know what you want to do with your life, this is a great opportunity because you will learn everything in the first year about a little bit about everything: operations, strategy, accounting, marketing, finance, etc. You have that summer internship to go to a structured program, whether you want to do investment banking, private equity. You get a trial run. If it goes really well, they give you a job offer. In the second year, you study that specific subject, whether it's finance or marketing. You just specialize for a year, and then you're off and running in the corporate world. This is generally what it's set up for, traditional programs, and you follow the set path. Mm-hmm. But if you have the entrepreneurial bug, there were a bunch of people that did it. It's not necessarily required, right? Mm-hmm. The way that we think about it, from my perspective, is let's say you knew you want to be a finance guy, which was me, right? So I went to Wharton for that finance brand. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether you're in the UK or in Australia, you say the word Wharton and you're a finance guy, right? Mm-hmm. So Harvard's got great business school, got great medical school, law school, undergrad. Say the word Harvard, you're like, well, you're smart, but which direction are you smart? So I wanted that brand, and that's what I paid for. But my assumption being I would just get to study for finance for 2 years. I didn't need the general stuff. I just wanted to specialize. So We started a program here, and I'll tell you more about it. I'll just do it at the high level now, and then we can dive down wherever we want to go in the
Yep,
conversation.
yep.
Our view was, if you knew you want to be a finance guy, you can do basically the second year of the MBA, where you get the technical specialist knowledge. So you can do 1 year, which is half the opportunity cost of salary, and we charge less than a quarter of the price because our assumption is people don't need a lot of debt. Get you fast-tracked, get you back out in the industry, starting your business, doing whatever you wanted to do. The traditional MBA is a great idea, but it's sort of become a machine in and amongst itself.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I always wondered there was a lot of theory-based learning inside the curriculums of the universities that I attended, and I always wondered, I wonder how much of this is actual practical knowledge that I can use in the real world.
It's funny you say that. So Wharton does a great job of this. I think all of the top business schools have a mix of theorists and practitioners, and we've tried to duplicate that in our program. The last thing you want is someone who's been their whole life in an ivory tower and maybe doesn't necessarily know exactly how it works in the real world, because it's wonderful to learn theory. Let's take finance, right? The efficient market theory. The rational actors in the stock market are going to be able to be predicted, and they're going to do the right things. We've seen the stock market. It's crazy. He's manic depressive. Mr. Market gets up one day, he's happy. The next day he's sad. The market goes all over the place. Now, the reality is we teach efficient market theory because we don't have a better way to explain the market. So you can walk in as a professor and say, I know this isn't how it works, but I'm going to teach this to you anyway because it's the best idea we've got. Isn't that crazy?
It is, absolutely. And, I've worked with some finance people closely in our business, and, they are actual practitioners, real life grinders. They do the work for real. And, I always got a bit narky about talking with professors, with no disrespect. I always wondered whether or not they actually had, rubber on the road. Did they actually go through the grind themselves, or were they purely coming from a theoretical standpoint?
It's interesting. If you go to the top schools like a Harvard or Wharton, any of those schools, all of the professors, the teaching is a platform for them. It's a brand so that they are actually out in the real world. They've got their own consulting businesses. My finance professor at Wharton ran his own hedge fund. And I think it allows them to have more credibility, the fact that you teach at a top business school. So I think there's an elite level. I think when you get down to some of the lower tiers, that probably isn't quite the case. But you think about Drucker or Siegel or any of these guys at the top schools, they are institutions in and of themselves.
I'd just love to spin around a bit, because I often spend a bit of time learning a bit about the people behind the interview. Would you mind sharing with our audience a little bit about what you like to do in your downtime? Do you have any downtime?
Sure. Well, starting up this program, my wife would tell you I don't, but it's actually been a fascinating year. So almost to the day a year ago, we were on a honeymoon down in Australia and New Zealand. I got to say, you guys have probably the most beautiful place in the world that I've ever seen. Loved it. Everybody's wonderful and kind. So we were doing that as part of a...
Just keep that a secret for me?
Was it just from Americans or from everybody in general?
Just from everybody. No, just kidding.
Well, it has helped your housing market, right? It's gone through the roof. So from our perspective, it was the beginning of a job change. So we wanted a higher quality of life. It was about leaving. I was working at JP Morgan in New York City, which is a great learning place, but kind of a nutso job, 100 hours a week, really intense. New York City is a crazy place in and of itself. And we thought we would like to start a family, move somewhere more idyllic, be able to afford a home. So that involved moving up here as part of becoming a professor and launching this program. So it's been really busy on the professional front and the personal front, buying a house. We just had our first child. All amazing blessings. These are good problems to have.
Yes.
So my downtime will be getting back to going to the gym, getting back to playing basketball. I guess my wife would probably say my hobby is the investing stuff, which I love, but it ties in so much with my day job, I don't even think about it like that.
Are you into like stocks and bonds? Is that your thing you enjoy to do personally?
Oh, absolutely. I just love reading about it and thinking about it. And most people would probably say that's not fun. I guess for me, it's a fun hobby.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. There's all these different things that are occurring nowadays. You can just look anywhere you like, and there's some new thing coming out. Look at the cryptocurrency world. That's just going crazy at the moment. But yeah, thank you for sharing a little bit about your personal background there, and congratulations on the moves that you're making.
Thank you.
I'd love to talk a little bit more about the program itself. Can you explain to us how this all comes about for somebody who's looking to get into it?
Yeah, so we have both a full-time and a part-time program. And our assumption is that there are probably three types of people in the world this is applicable for. There are some people that are in undergrad at the moment. So they're at university, and there's probably a couple of types. Maybe there's a physics or a math major who realizes, I don't want to teach, I don't want to get a PhD,
Hmm.
but quants are perfect for finance. They absolutely love them. And you just need a year of getting up to speed on the terminology and studying it, and then suddenly all the top firms want you. There are other people in undergrad. I was a history major, or poli-sci majors are the same. They have a quantitative ability. They've got that sort of Renaissance education. Again, if they get a good grounding, they'd be up the learning curve very fast and are the types of people an institution would want. And then you have people like finance majors or business majors or accounting majors who maybe are at a smaller school and the big companies won't come there because they won't have enough people for them to hire. It's not worth their time.
Hmm.
For them to be able to come to a program like ours where you're right outside of Boston, which is the second or third biggest finance hub in all of America, and you have all the companies on your back door, it's an opportunity for them to get to a really good shop that they wouldn't have been able to in Podunk, wherever they were studying before, just because there aren't enough companies around.
Mm.
And we also have the part-time program for the working professionals. You've got people who are already in the industry. Maybe they're in the back office. They want to move to the front office, or they want to do a career change from wherever they are now into becoming a financial advisor. And you have a family. You don't want to give up all of that right away. So you've been able to do this one night a week for 2 years and eventually solve it and have that degree and that credential behind you, which allows you to make that switch. Because when I was at JP Morgan, for example, you could not get even an interview for a mid or a senior level role without having a master's degree. It was a checkbox because robots do the screening these days.
Mm.
Now, you could have a master's in public health. You could have a master's in social work. You have a master's and you check a box. I don't recommend anyone gets a degree to check a box, but there is one of the assumptions about an MBA. You need that to become the CEO of a company, the CFO. You probably need an advanced degree. In America, there's a bit of a stigma if you don't have that, but you don't necessarily need to spend 2 years and all that time and money to do it.
It's one of those questionable components to entrepreneurialism nowadays. If you look at the likes of Steve Jobs, Richard Branson, and other leading figureheads in industry, I suspect many of those actually fell out of school. Bill Gates is another, and
Bill Gates is another. Facebook, right? Zuckerberg decided he didn't need to finish at Harvard. And I think those are the classic examples everybody cites, but I
mhm,
would worry about, what are they, 1 in 100 that dropped out and actually made the real big success?
mhm, mhm. These are all relevant questions, and again, I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to spend some time with you talking about these things because these are the things that are going on just quietly in individuals' minds as they start to think about what their future career path is going to look like.
What's interesting when I think about an entrepreneur, so let's take someone either maybe they're the strategy guy, they've got a great idea,
Hmm.
or maybe they're the techie guy and they're able to code. You mentioned Richard Branson. Maybe we should talk about him as an example.
Hmm.
He is a brilliant marketer, right? He's done an amazing job doing that, but he's not a finance guy. So
Hmm.
whenever he starts the next venture, he comes up with a brilliant idea, he will find a young finance person who's hungry, probably doesn't have to pay him a ton because he's young and he wants to work with Richard Branson, build up the brand. So
Hmm.
he knows he needs a brilliant CFO to partner with him. And I think that's where I was going, is that you're going to need a team of 2 or 3 other people with the right skill set as you launch something. To some extent, university is a brilliant way, and they talk about that for business school. It's a brilliant way to network. You're finding other really smart people with the right skill set and a complement,
Hmm.
because you maybe be a generalist if you're starting it up on your nights and weekends in your garage. But as soon as you want to scale it, as soon as you want to make it more professional, certainly when you're going to approach investors, you need a team around you. How do you find that team?
Hmm.
You could argue the internet has democratized a lot of that, and some of the sites between Gust and AngelList and others, you can find the right person to partner with, and that can be very successful, especially if you're thinking about people around the world, the follow the sun model to find the right fit.
Hmm.
I would also argue at the end of the day, though, as an investor and a board member, I look at companies, I think, okay, you might sound good on paper, but how are you actually going to work together? Do you actually know each other? Do you have any history? How are you going to be successful when times get tough? If you could say, hey, we spent a couple years together at university before we dropped out to start this company, to me, that's a really interesting story.
Yeah, I'd love to just touch on something I saw recently in a webinar event with the Motley Fool CEO, and they were talking about the latest way to, and it might go off track a little bit, but I think it's somewhat relevant, is the importance of looking at founders remaining in businesses to achieve longer term success from an investment standpoint. And I think that this is somewhat relevant to what we're talking about today. having the right people on board and having them stick around. And, you know, the university alumni programs are really great for connecting people. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I guess you make a very interesting point. So let's say we were talking about the guy that came up with the genius idea, and he wants to exit at whatever point it is. You would assume there's usually going to be some golden handcuffs to hold them in to make sure that they pass over that knowledge for whatever company's buying them out and bringing it along. You wouldn't want all that knowledge to walk out the door, all the history, all the contacts, all the smart point of views. Frankly, that you need that. That's part of what you're buying. You're probably not just buying the company. So I would assume any person who's buying them out is going to be locking them in.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Again, this is one of those topics that makes you really think about what's important to you. I just love the fact that you've started this and you've compressed it, and you've taken out all the superfluous, theoretical based stuff, haven't you?
Well, that was our theory. We wanted to make sure people knew the exact technicals of what they needed to do. But I guess it comes back to my Wharton knowledge again. I was there to specialize in finance. I didn't want all of the other subjects. I felt like I'd known a lot of those from my previous career. You might have some people who would say, hey, I'm coming right out of undergrad. I don't know anything. I need all of that knowledge. So it's about finding, I think, the right program and sort of opening your mindset just to step back and say, MBA isn't necessarily required for me. Or let's take an entrepreneur. Maybe it's not required right now. Maybe they try right out of university starting a business that could be, even if it's a failure, how much you would learn from that. I tend to think that the successful entrepreneurs, the ones who probably failed 4 or 5 times but kept getting up, kept making progress. When you fall down, as long as you fall forward, you made progress, in my view.
Absolutely. There are some sage insights and great advice coming from somebody who's right in the thick of it right now. Alexander, thank you very much for sharing those things. When people want to touch base with you and learn more about your wonderful program, where will they find you?
So my wife would tell you that my smartphone is probably glued to my hand, and I have it most of the time. So we had that really long name that was hard to pronounce, the Master of Science in Financial Analysis, which we turned into an acronym, MSFA. So it's the MSFA at Gordon.Edu, comes right to my inbox.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this information with us today. And again, thanks for being on the My Future Business show today.
Rick, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's been fun having you on the call with us today. Now click on that big red subscribe button and make sure you leave us a comment, share us with your friends, and join the growing list of leading entrepreneurs who have enjoyed their time on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews.